So today is sort of a request video. I said I would show how I do scarves and cloaks now on some of my miniatures. I was doing some specifically for the Retreat from Moscow project. I wanted some models to make them look a little bit colder by adding scarves and impromptu cloaks and so on. And I found a method that I think works really well, and it's simple. Obviously you need a figure to start with. I've got this Vallejo plastic putty, which is basically ground down marble with a glue medium sort of thing, and it goes on thick. You'll see that in a minute, but when it dries rock hard, and it's perfect for filling gaps, but I'm using it to help create the cloaks. And then to make the cloaks and the scarves, I'm using t-shirt material. Now I've actually bought a huge, like a 2 kilo bag of this material. I use this for my paintbrush cleaning. You know, bag of rag basically. It's just cut up pieces of white t-shirt material. I find it's the best material I use. I used to use paper towels for cleaning my brushes, but this works fantastic. And now it's got another life because I can use it to make scarves and cloaks and so on. So let's crack straight on and I'll show you how I do it. I'm just going to do one basic model. I might be painting this up later, but basically I just want to show you the process that I'm using for making these items out of fabric and the plastic putty. So for this model I just want to add a scarf basically. I think he could do with a scarf around his neck just to make him look a little bit colder, ironically, by adding the scarf. You know, he's needed to go away from his official uniform and add a scarf nicked from some unlucky civilian probably. So I'm going to cut just a very thin strip of this material, and for the scarf it doesn't need to be very wide at all, no more than maybe 5mm, as you'll see. I'll cut it too long and I can always trim it later. So having cut a strip, which is going to be my scarf, I put a bit of the putty in there, and I'm going to add, I do have some water, I just a couple of drops, mix it down until it's almost like it becomes almost like a paint. It's that sort of density, and I'm just going to rub it on to the piece of cloth. Don't worry about it getting everywhere, it's fiddly stuff, but do you know what, it doesn't matter. So there you got it soaked into the material. Now I will be adding more after I've put it on, but this is just to make sure that there is some of this plastic putty all the way through the material once I put it on. And I'm gonna leave it curled like that because I think that works fine for me. And then around that figure, I'm just basically going to wind it as tight as I can around his neck. You can see there that obviously the one piece is way too long, so I'm gonna shorten that off. There you go. So at the moment it looks a bit rubbish, but you've got the scarf wrapped around him a couple of times, and we can do a little bit of texturing on that. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to put some of this watered down putty, and I'm just going to paint that on, trying to not get it on the rest of the model if I can help it. And that is pretty much it. I want that stuck down to his body, I want that stuck in, so I'm going to put some extra underneath. What I have done in the past is once it's set and it's gone hard, if I want to fill any gaps underneath, then I can always use the undiluted putty to fill the gaps like I would any other model. Now I'm going to wash off some of the excess because it's got a bit everywhere. Okay, just wetting my brush down so I can pull that extra putty off, and now I'm just going to leave that to dry now, and that will set pretty hard as it is. But what I will do again is when that's dry, I will give it another coat of the watered down putty, underneath. I'll put it over the top again just to make sure that that surface sets nice and hard. And it is rock hard. You can paint on it very easily. I'll show you some photos of some finished models. But there you go. Quite an easy scarf wrapped around this guy's neck to keep him warm against the Russian chill. And it's a little bit bulky. And obviously I can probably do it a little bit cleaner, I imagine, but I think that looks pretty good. Certainly better than anything I could sculpt, and perhaps a tad more realistic, because he's got himself the biggest scarf he could find to wrap around his neck, because he's absolutely freezing. So he'll be a lot warmer now that he's got that around his neck. So I'm going to let that dry, and then I can come back to it and just add another layer of the putty and water mix over the top, just to sort of harden it even more. Now the other use is I can use this to add the same technique to add cloaks to models. So here we have a plastic skeleton from North Star. I was going to use it for Frostgrave or D&D or something like that. And again, despite ignoring the irony of putting warm clothing on a skeleton, I'm going to put a cloak on the back of this model because it's a nice easy model to do. So there we have the basic skeleton. And you can see he's got some flowing clothes, but no cloak. Well, I want a nice long cloak on him. So I'll just start off with a very roughly cut, doesn't have to be perfect, square that is a lot bigger, obviously, than the creature that the guy that I'm putting on, because I'm going to put some folds into this cloak, so I want it to be a little bit more. There's a little bit more material there, and of course, it's going to have to narrow a bit towards the shoulder. But I'll be measuring this up as I go. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to trim the bottom, give it a straighter edge across the bottom. Actually, I'll tell you what I might do. Because this is a skeleton and it's going to be ragged, I'm going to create some little ragged cuts in the bottom. So you can see I've cut out a very, very rough cloak. If there's any tailors in the audience, close your eyes now, because you're going to be deeply offended by this very roughly shaped cloak, wider at the bottom than at the top, with a little gap to go around the head. But I promise you that once you've applied the watered down putty and then painted over it, it will look like a cloak. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to super glue it into place. And then afterwards I will apply the putty, because it can be quite fiddly, and it will keep falling off otherwise. So what I will be doing is I will be adding a dab of little super glue to hold it into place when I find the super glue. So I've added a dab of glue down the back and a dab at the front and stuck the cloth on, and now I can crumple that cloth up to create some folds and ripples in it. As you can see, I've added quite a bit of tatty edges to the bottom, and now that it's more or less in place, I can just start applying a very wet layer of the watered down putty, and it will soak into that fabric, and as I say, it will set quite hard when it's done. But there you go, you've got a basic cloak there. Now I can fill in some of the gaps and some of the extra pieces. I can trim pieces off when it's hard. The other thing I can do is I can trim some of the excess off that looks a little bit clunky with a sharp knife, and that'll come off. So I'm going to let that dry. So this skeleton that doesn't really need to be kept warm is going to be, it's got a nice scarf, cloak around his neck. Let's bring that down a little bit more there. Right, so I'm going to leave that to dry, and then we'll come back to that when it's hardened. So there you have, that's my basic technique for adding scarves and cloaks to miniatures. As I say, the watered down putty goes on really nicely, it soaks into the material, and when it dries rock hard, and it's waterproof, so you can paint on it really nicely. You know, the paint doesn't sink into it. And as I say, you can use the putty undiluted straight out of the tube to fill any gaps, and you can sculpt that to a certain extent with a wet brush, so you can fill any gaps around the necklines and fill up some of the space behind the cloaks if you want. Really versatile technique. I ain't actually going to be painting the 2 models that I've just done and shown you there. But I have recently used this technique on the last batch of Cossacks that I did. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just show you some photographs of those, so you can see what can be achieved. I think they look really nice. The only downside I would say is the material is a little bit thick. So the scarves and so on do look a tad bulky. I'm quite happy with how that looks on these particular models. But if you want something that's slightly thinner, it might be worth experimenting with some different thinner materials. So long as they're fibre materials, the paint will sink into them, or the putty, the watered down putty will sink into it. And like I say, when it sets rock hard, then you've got a nice stable surface to paint on. So there you go. That's my technique. Apologies if the video isn't very well put together. I did my best to try and film. I'm going to have to do a bit of practicing to try and film myself while doing something. Constantly found myself straying out of shot or looking for tools and they're not in position. So I've got a lot of things to learn. So hopefully next time I do one of these sort of videos of me doing and making something, it will look a lot better. But anyway, I hope you found that interesting and enjoy the pictures of the Cossacks to see what can be achieved with this technique.